work on high-end racing bikes for people that have been training for a long time to go and do their elite race overseas or locally. But that doesn't mean that I don't fix everybody's bike, and I'm not a bike snob, so it doesn't matter what you turn up with, you're not going to get turned away or anything like that, which can happen other places. I do work on mountain bikes as well. I did a lot of mountain biking back in the 90s, so we're well truly across any of that for anybody who needs it. So tonight we're basically just going to touch as much as we can in a short space of time on the things that you need to be thinking about for your bike, comfort, and getting through the ride without any mechanicals, because you can train all you like, but if your bike breaks down, it's not a great day. If your bike's making noises for that length of time, you're probably going to be reasonably unhappy or annoyed. So we can start with, I guess, and some of this will cross over with what Damian's going to say. He'll go much more into detail with it. But you've got three contact points that you need to think about. That's your seat, your handlebars, and your pedals. One of the most common things that I see is people that walk around on their cleats all the time, and they will break or start coming loose on race day. So cleats aren't expensive for your shoes, maybe $30, $35. Buy some new cleats, put them on. Either get the guys at the shop to do it if you're not comfortable. If you're comfortable with where your cleats are, then you can draw an outline around them and put them back in the same place. Make sure you do the bolts up with a bit of grease and do them tight. If not, get a bike fit. They'll put your cleats in the right position for you, because a couple of millimeters here, there, or this way can cause big problems long term. So replace your cleats. Pretty simple. Then you go to your seat. Everybody's got a seat. Hopefully it's comfy. If it's not comfy, it's not necessarily the seat that's not comfy. The bike fit can often make a seat comfortable because it was the position that you were sitting in, the angle that it was on, or the placement of your hip bones over there. So make sure it's tight. People that are having hydration packs on the back, make sure the bolts that hold them up. We see a lot of this in triathlons, where all the shaking and vibration, they either lose their bottle or the rack that holds them on will come off, which can be a problem when there's people behind you. Bar tape is another one, and again that crosses over to positioning. Once your bike is positioned properly, you've had a good bike fit and you're comfortable where you are, you can be much more comfortable in the contact area. So when we tend to tape handlebars, we make it quite thin down here, we space it out. Your bar tape's only this long, so we can't make it fat everywhere, and you don't need it fat everywhere. So we generally make it spaced out as much as we can to here, which gives us quite a few wraps through this contact patch area. If you've had problems with palms, again, that can be bike fitting and positioning, but also putting some tape underneath this section and taping over it properly can give you a really nice cushion without feeling like you've got this massive double wrapped horrible tape. So that can make the difference of numb hands, that sort of thing during the day. So those are your contact points, and they're pretty straightforward. The other things you need to do, obviously you need to get your bike serviced. If it's running well, it's probably going to stay running well, but that's not necessarily the case all the time. Sometimes if a mechanic casts their eye over it, they can point stuff out. Hopefully in your shop, or the shop that you go to, you'll actually be able to talk to the mechanic while they're showing you what's going on with your bike, and you get to understand what the issue is, and you can understand why he's suggesting or she's suggesting that you need to replace something. Right? There's very expensive bikes, and then there's cheap bikes. They all do the same job. One's going to be slightly heavier than the other one. If you're racing at the pointy end of the race, then they make a difference. You don't need to go and buy a brand new expensive bike for an event like this unless you have a real problem with what you've got. The brand new expensive bike that's not maintained is nowhere near as good as an old cheap bike which is well maintained, and that's something that a lot of people miss. A lot of the times when I'm at events, the bikes that I see breaking down and coming to me for help are actually some of the most expensive bikes out there, which is just, yeah, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but just because you've got an expensive bike, it doesn't mean that it's maintained well. If you move on to the drive chain, this is where everything is happening, right? This is the most important part of your bike. This is where you don't need to spend a lot of money, but a little bit of money on maintaining your drive chain can get you massive goals or gains in your wattage and your power output, your comfort, and just your enjoyment of riding. If things are clean and smooth and running well and shifting well, you're going to be happy. If things are crunching and grinding and you're generally just putting in a lot of effort, there's not a lot of happening. Any noise that you can hear is generally friction. Friction means that you're wearing things out, and it means you're doing more work than you need to. So if your bike has been serviced correctly and it's running reasonably well, then there isn't much you need to think about as far as bike maintenance goes, other than maintaining your drive chain, making sure that it's lubed and making sure that it's reasonably clean. Things have changed in the lubricant market a lot in the last 5 or 6 years. There's always been a couple of good lubes out there. 90% of you, I'm assuming, are using a drip-on, oily, wet, sort of petroleum-based oil, which leaves the chain looking pretty clean after you've just applied it, and then after you've ridden maybe 10k, you look down and you go, why did I bother? It's black. That's because any petroleum wet-based oil is going to pick up environmental factors, whether it be sand, dirt, grit, and it's going to stick to it. It's fine having oil inside your engine, it's sealed. It's fine having it inside your gearbox, it's sealed. This is external, so it's a bit of a problem when you have oil, which is wet, external. There are a lot of much better quality wax-based lubricants out there. You can do slow submersion, which is 2 hard basket, or you can get a high quality drip-on wax-based lubricant, which will be carried on with some sort of solvent or water, and then it'll evaporate off and leave behind a relatively dry wax behind. That dry wax is going to lubricate significantly better and not pick up those environmental factors by 90% over your average oil. The reality is that most oils that you look at that are in your bike shop, 20 of them there, and they're all very confusing. And this one will tell you to clean your chain, and this one will tell you it'll make you go faster and it'll push your car forward. But the reality is they're all very similar. Inside a velodrome, when you've got a controlled environment, some of those oils can be very good because we eliminate all those environmental factors. But once we get out onto the road and the dust, especially in here in Perth, you ride through one puddle with the sprinkler and you're basically throwing sand and very expensive components that are just going to start turning into a cutting compound. So the thing that you guys want to know is, how do I keep it clean, and how can I spend less time getting that clean and more time riding my bike? The trick is to use a wax-based lubricant, and knowing how to apply it properly is the most important thing, because if you apply a wax-based lubricant incorrectly, you're probably going to do slightly more harm than good. So if you have a drip-on oil, like any of the oils that you're using, and you apply it down here, let's put this down. Most people would put your oil on up here and backpedal. Centrifugal force is going to push that oil off the chain. So regardless of what you're using, we want to be putting it on down here. As we backpedal, it's getting pushed through the chain. So if you put a wet oil onto your chain and you ride, it's going to move around, it's going to unfortunately get up your spokes, it will somehow get onto your braking surface, everything goes wrong, right? That's because it keeps moving. This good quality wax-based lubricant won't move. Once it's dried, after 12 hours to 24 hours, it doesn't move anymore. So if you haven't gone up to where you need it to be before it dries, you do have a little bit of a problem. So where we need to lube the chain, a lot of people think that you need to lube the cogs, you need to lube your cassette and your jockey wheels. You don't. That's the worst possible thing you can do. Where you need the oil, and the only place you need the oil, is in between the outer plate, the inner plate. You've got a roller, that's the main thing, and you've got a pin underneath your roller. You need to get the lubricant down to that pin. Once you've got it down there, you've done your job. Anything else can be removed. So if you were using a wet drip-based oil,
you have to clean down the drivetrain first before you apply it?
you do. It depends on the lube, but 90% of the time, well, if you're using a wet-based oil, yeah, you should clean it every time, but unfortunately you're going to be cleaning it once a week if you're training for this ride, because it's going to be black at the end of every week. If it's black, it's not good. So generally what we do is, if we imagine that this is the end of your oil can, we would do the left-hand side. So a lot of people will transfer it down the middle, like so, and then back pedal 2 or 3 times, done, right? Does anybody else do it differently than that? No? So that's generally the way that we put it on. It is the wrong way to put it on. But it is better than not doing it at all. So just get that right. It is better than not doing it. Where you need it, so if you transfer it down the roller, that's immediately going to transfer to the cogs and jockey wheels that you're in. You're going to get it onto those anyway, it's unavoidable, but you don't need to put the majority of your lube onto that roller. Ideally, you want to be doing the left-hand side of the chain, through, and then come across and do the right-hand side of the chain. That's going to get it in between the inner plate and the outer plate. The next trick is to do this for at least 2 minutes. It'll feel like forever. It's 120 seconds. What's happening at this point is the articulation is moving that oil and it's working its way down underneath the roller and down to the pin where you need it. If you're using an oil like most of you are, once you've done that, after a couple of minutes, so one thing I should have said, always start the big chain ring, and generally about the middle of the batch. So once you've done that for a couple of minutes, you then get your rag, and it seems very counterintuitive to make a fist as much as you possibly can, which seems crazy because you've just put it on, but now you're going to wipe off everything that you can. The reason we're doing that is because we now have the lube down under the plate, down to the roller, and down to the pin. Anything that's external is just going to pick up rubbish, pick up sand and dirt. You don't need to lube the outside of your chain, and you don't need to lube these cogs. So we'll then wipe off the excess. We can make a little pinch with our jockey wheels. 1, 2. The reason we do it in the big chain ring is because now that's going to have quite a bit of excess oil on it, so we can then quite easily cleanse all of the excess off. You're going to find that things are going to stay a lot cleaner, and a lot of people can't be bothered because it's such a messy job. But if you have your oil, some nitrate gloves, and a rag, and a little box, and maybe a piece of cardboard to stick under the bike, you can just wheel the bike out, put it on. It takes about 3 minutes to do everything properly, and if you do that regularly, you're going to do quite well. Wipe the chain down before you do it. Then, if you're using a wax-based lubricant, you're pretty much going to do everything exactly the same. I can wax this one. So, it's a great lube. It's got a terrible applicator, so it tends to look like it dribbles out. So we will So that looks like I've just...
Did you do both sides, both edges then?
I did, yeah, roughly. Yeah. So it now looks like I've got milk all over the chain, and you can see quite a bit of it. So it's just bubbled on the outside. Now we massage it in. And we do this for a couple of minutes, and you'll find it disappears. Where did it all go? It's actually gone down inside the chain where we need it. So once we've done that...
You have to put your hand there and just massage it in with the hand as it goes. Is that what you do?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Obviously if you're using a petroleum-based oil like most of the oils you're using, you should put a glove on or wash your hands immediately. Depends how particular you are. This is a wax-based lubricant, and it's not a problem. They're basically paraffin-based waxes. So that there, in a couple of minutes, will be dry to the touch. That is what my chain looks like most of the time, and I haven't cleaned this chain in about 2,000 Ks. So after 300 Ks roughly, or 500 if I put more on, during summer obviously, because we know we're not going to get rain, which is a wonderful thing, I would wipe that down with a rag, and I would do it again, and I would probably do that up to 2,500 K. Then I would degrease my drivetrain. And with these lubricants, you can actually just use boiling water because it's wax. It'll actually, most of it will float off. So that's pretty much what we should be doing. That's all you really need to be doing to maintain your bike, is keep it clean. We can talk for ages about how to clean it, but we probably don't have time for that because I do waffle on a bit. So once you've done that and you know your bike's working, then you don't have too much of an issue. We do have some safety issues, and one of the main safety issues that we find regularly on bikes is loose headsets.
Can I just ask you quickly about the wax? You said about 300 Ks in summer?
Yeah.
I use wax in summer, and then for some reason I switched to petroleum in winter.
That's not a bad thing.
Is that? I mean, should I?
No, if you're using a high quality wax, some of the water wax emulsions, what are you using, squirt or?
Milky coloured thing.
Yeah, squirt or smooth.
Squirt.
Yeah. So that is the original water wax emulsion from South Africa, and it's pretty good. It's a little bit gloopy, and there are more viscous waxes. This one here is actually also a water wax emulsion from South Africa, but it is a lot more viscous, so it's easy to apply. You smooth, you should heat up, leave it in the sun, have your chain warm.
So if I was using wax in winter, how many Ks would
So
you think?
the problem with water wax emulsions during winter, and they do work, they're still, in my opinion, they're still better, but if it's a water carrier to get it onto the chain and then evaporate off, leaving the wax behind, if you add lots of water, it can break back down to its original form, which means it becomes viscous.
So I'll just stay with what I do. So
I would probably just apply more often during winter and stick with smooth. With squirt, I'd say that's still a better lube. There are more expensive and better ones that are carried on with alcohol and solvents, which is the Silka lube. So that evaporates, the alcohol and solvents evaporate, leaving the wax behind, so it's not really touched by water, and that is independently tested as a much better lube. So I would stick with that. So one of the safety issues that we have is headsets. So we often find when we pull forks apart that there is damage to the stereo tube. Most of us have got, you're already nodding. Yep, been down this road. So if your headset is loose, i.e. if you can, there's 3 different ways to test if you have a loose headset. You can do a drop test. That sounds pretty solid. There's no rattling or vibration. We can put the front brake on. There's no movement there. There's flex, and that's normal, but there's no knock, knock, knock. You'll feel it. And also, if you can twist these washers, these ones here, they're not compressed enough. So you need to tighten it up. But if you've ridden with a headset that's been loose for a period of time, there's a little compression ring underneath this top cap that pushes onto your bearing. If it's not under compression, it will rotate on your carbon stereo tube. So often when we take a fork out with a bike that's had a loose headset, it's actually worn a nice little ring into your carbon, depending on how long it is. That is, it's like putting a glass in a cut in a piece of glass. It's going to want to snap at that point. Unfortunately, this point here where it happens is the leverage point. So when you're here and you hit a pothole or a gutter that you weren't expecting, there's a heck of a lot of weight transferred, and it won't go subtly. It'll let you know, and you'll meet the ground. So if you've ever had a loose headset for a long period of time and then one of your mates has tightened it up, get it taken out and inspected. The other thing is carbon stereo tubes that come up through here, they're very susceptible to overcompression from people tightening these up too much. So it's a very good thing. If it's a new bike, it's probably not too much of an issue. You will find that new bikes generally come out of the factory with very little grease in their headset bearings. So it's a good idea, even with the new bike, to get it taken out and pack them full of grease and then put them back together again, because factories don't like a lot of grease because it gets throughout the factory. So keep an eye on your headset. If it is loose or it's been loose, get somebody to pull it out, inspect your stereo tube, If they're unsure, they'll take it somewhere and get it dyed and UV checked. And finding out that you've got damage to your stereo tube might cost you $250 to repair it. You generally don't need a new fork, but that's nothing in comparison to what it costs for dentures. And if that's all you get, then it's a pretty good day. So then we move on to things that can make your ride easier, which can be the gearing for the day. A lot of people train all of their time for the damage ride going up and down the coast. Depending on where you live, but not necessarily spend all day climbing, which is unfortunately what you guys are going to feel like you're doing. So there's a couple of different ways to change the gear ratio of your bike, and the easiest and cheapest way to do it, if it's possible for you, is to change your rear cassette. So gears have been getting a lot smaller over the years because people that used to buy bikes were professional racers. Now people that are buying bikes are people like you and I that aren't professional racers. So we need different gearing. So a lot of bikes are coming out with the gear ratios that'll be conducive to the day, but a lot of them that have been purchased previously, you might find that you're going to struggle getting up those hills and sticking in that gear for a long period of time. That in itself could end your day. So most bikes will come with a cassette where you can change the ratio. They'll generally all start with a 10 or 11 and they'll go to say 28 or 30. Most deraillers will cope with a 32 and up to 34 without having to change this. So a lot of the time, all you need to do is change your cassette ratio and ask for a larger cassette. Therefore, you've got 2 or 3 cogs in the bigger range, which are going to significantly help you get up those gears. We can also do it in your chain rings at the front. So this is a semi-compact, so 52, 36, 52 and 36. I can change these to a 50 and 34. That's going to make a massive difference getting up the hills. It's a bit more expensive doing that, and unfortunately availability in most chain rings is pretty low on the ground at the moment. But cassettes is not an issue. So think about the cassette ratio that you're going to use, and think about, am I struggling? And then work on that. There is one downside to that. If you, every time you change up here, you're losing cogs in the middle. So instead of going from a 12 to a 13, you might go from a 12 to a 14. So when you do ride on the flats and on certain gears, you'll go to change and your cadence will go, oh, that's a bigger one than I wanted, or that's a smaller one than I wanted. So that's the trade-off we make when we change our cassette ratio. But it wouldn't hurt for a lot of you to have a spare cassette for the Downs ride, and you can take it off afterwards, go back to the cassette that you were using for your normal day-to-day riding. So have a think about your cassette ratio and your gear ratio, because that can make a big difference. Then we move to tyres.
You have to add more links to compensate.
Generally not. You do need to bring out the B-tension screw to give yourself clearance when you're up here. Most chains, if you go from a 30 to a 32 or a 30 to a 34, isn't going to be too much of an issue, but your mechanic, when he fits it, will work that out. You may need a longer chain. It's possible. It'll generally only be 1, maybe 2 links. But if you don't have them, you're going to need them. So then we go to the other things that are going to let you down, and probably the most likely thing you're going to come across is punches. So if you are not proficient at changing punches, you can spend a long time getting really frustrated. It's hard enough at the best of times. You're sitting on a Sunday thinking, oh, I'll fix that slow flat paddling. But when you're absolutely knackered hiding under a tree because it's really hot and you can't get your tyre off, it's not a great feeling. So obviously we need to carry, I would suggest, at least 2 spare tubes, at least 2 CO2 canisters, and potentially a pump as well. The best thing that you can do is on a Sunday, sit down, relax after your ride, have a Gatorade or a glass of wine or beer, and just go, I'm going to take my tyre on and off 3 times. Might take you an hour. But every time you do it, you're going to get 3 or 4 minutes quicker, and then you're going to understand what's happening. So when you get a puncture, you're going to understand exactly what you need to do. You're going to be aware of what you need, and it's going to be quite a simple process. Not that you're going to look forward to it, but you're going to get a puncture and you go, I've got this, I've done it. Not, I'm going to have to wait for somebody because I can't get it off. So the first thing we need to do is know the best way to get a wheel out of our bike. Alright? So if you're in the big chain ring, and we shouldn't be, but if you're in the big chain ring, your derailleur is under a lot of stress. It's already up to there, and you don't have a lot of slack to play with. So if I try to pull my wheel out of here, I'm going to pull it back. This derailleur's in the way. It's going to be almost impossible to get it out, and you're going to be frustrated to change your tyre before you've even got the wheel out of the bike. So always put it into the smallest gear at the back, smallest gear at the front. You will have a release on your brake. They're all fairly similar. Some of them work in different ways, but we open up our brakes with a little lever. And now, you just pull our derailleur back, and our wheel comes out. If I was in a different gear, I wouldn't have been able to get it out. I may have even bent my drop out trying to force this out. The best thing about this is I know that when I put it back in, I need to put the chain on the smallest cog. And if I do that, the chain is going to not restrict the wheel going back in. It's going to be easy. If you have disc brake, and a lot of you will, you'll find that if you're not in the right gear, the problem becomes even worse because you've got to line up your dropouts, your chain, and your disc brake rotor. So if you can come up to the bike, pop this down, and pop it on the small chain ring, and it goes back in. If you have it in those gears, it's going to make life a lot easier. And just literally practicing that, because most of our punches are in the rear, will make the changing of the puncher a lot easier. Now,
I won't be carrying a bike stand on the back.
Yeah.
no, it does, I know. But you can lift the seat up and do it the same. And yes, it does make it. You actually find low-hanging branches or threads are pretty handy at both your bike if you've got some on the day and they're stuck around, and if they're not threads. So, do any of you struggle getting your tyres on and off? Yeah.
Only when I bought a tubeless
so
tyre with a non-tubeless rim.
So there are some honest people here, and everybody else is just going to keep quiet. That's fine. So you've got a puncher. So what we'll do is put some air in it first. So the problem we have getting tyres off and back on again is the inner shape of the rim. So do any of you, when you pump your tyre up, you hear it go bang, bang? Does it sort of make a cracking sound as it pops into place? Yep. That's the tyre popping onto the feed. So, on the inside of this rim, this one's not pronounced, but some of them are very much so. You have your walls come down, your tyre sits up here, you've got your two walls, then it comes across flat, and then there's a low pot down here. If your tyre is on the high spot, this outer edge before it drops down, you are going to really struggle to get your tyre on and off, and potentially it's actually impossible. And you may break tyre levers, and if you've got fancy carbon rims, you may also crack the carbon on the rim, forcing that lever over it. So what we have to do is, everything pretty much starts and ends with the valve. So at the moment, all I'm doing is pushing this from the outside off that bead into the centre part. Right. All of a sudden, the surface that you're trying to put it on is about 5 mil smaller on this side, so it's significantly smaller. Start at the valve. One tyre lever in should generally be enough. If you really struggle to get that in, go round, because now it's under tension, and if you push it into that lower spot, the tension that you're holding it on here will hold it to that lower spot. Then we just push around. We take out our tube. We do not throw it into the bush when nobody's looking, because you will be disqualified if you're caught, and it's not the right thing to do. So, if you've got a second, it's a long day, so first thing I would do is run my fingers around obviously use your eyes as well, but run your fingers around, see if you can feel anything sharp. The worst thing you can do is jam a new tube in without looking, and then you can hear it go, it's right there. And that is 20 centimetres from the valve hole. My valve hole is here, so the puncher is right here. There's a little cut there, and you can make sure that the glass is removed or whatever it is. So doing that's going to save you doing it twice and getting quite frustrated. So once you've done that, back that tube up. This is coincidentally roughly how much air you need to put into your tube before you put it back in. Never put your tube in flat, because if you put it in flat, it's going to go in twisted, it can get caught. It's going to really, really want to be your friend and help you if you put roughly this much air into it. So again, we start at the valve.
So that's enough air just to
hold it shape.
just to round it, sort of thing.
Literally just to hold it shape.
Yeah.
If we go any more than this, it's actually going to get larger and we'll have an overlap. So we just want enough to hold our shape. So once we pop that in, so what I'm going to do now, I'm not trying to put the tyre on. Right, so the tube's in. Right now, I'm not going to try to put the tyre on. What I'm going to do is put the tube on the right side of the rim. So we're going to move. So right now, the tube is happy and it's home. So now, again, we start at the valve. So the first thing to do is roll it under. If anybody can see there, see how this is popped up here?
Yeah.
And it's dropping in down here. It's sitting on top of the valve. So as soon as you get that on, we push this up, that comes down. We hadn't have done that, we would have had a big problem because the tube would have popped up. Okay? So now we move around here to the opposite side of the valve, and now it's getting tight, right? Okay? I've got big strong hands and a mechanic's thumb that's done this a million times. I could struggle to get that on, it's tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let a tiny little bit of air out, and then I'm going to make sure that this is all dropped into the middle. On this particular rim, it's not a big issue. On some of your rims, unless you do this process, your tyre is not going to go back on. You might have you and your mate with two tyre levers trying to do this. All you're going to do is pinch it and damage things. Then we go back to the other side, and then you'll find that you generally end up with it quite loose. And it pops on. So once we've done that, we pump it up, we put it back in, we're away laughing.
Do you go straight to full pressure there, or you just pump up a little bit and then just check?
I would generally, if you've done this correctly, I don't need to go around and check to make sure that there's none of the tube sort of caught underneath here, because I made sure that it was holding its shape. I made sure that I got the tube inside properly. So generally now, I would just go straight up to whatever your pressure is.
Yeah, just put a bit in and roll it to make sure it's...
Yeah, and that can't hurt. Like a couple of minutes just to do that, and you can visualise just by having a look and going, no, I can't see the tube. If you can see the tube, you need to get that tube inside. So once you've done that, we pump it up. Tyre pressure is how long's a piece of string. Everybody's got different requirements. Everybody's got different widths. So this is a wide 24mm internal with a 25mm tyre, so it's quite a fat tyre. So this I can run, and it's very fast at 80 psi. This is a very narrow rim with a 25mm tyre, so I can probably, I would need to run this at probably about 95 psi. So depending on the width of your rim, the size of your tyre, and your rider weight, there are a lot of differences. The reality is, for most people running a narrower, older style rim, you're going to be up around the sort of 85s to 95s to 100. If it's really narrow and a 23, an old school really thin tyre, you might need to go up to 100. The general school of thought is, if you've got 100 in the back, you'll have 95 in the front. If you've got 90 in the back, you'll have 85 in the front. You're doing different jobs. This is carrying all your weight. This one's doing your cornering and your comfort. So taking 5 psi out of the front tyre, if you imagine you're on just holding on to handlebars, you're not even pedaling up hills, you're just holding on to handlebars for 5 hours That's quite tiring, right? Just doing that without any exercise, without cycling at all. If those handlebars are doing this, that's a lot of hard work before you even start turning your legs. So if you can mitigate some of that with getting the right tyre pressure, running it a little bit lower, but obviously not too low, a little bit lower, and having some good bar tape, that can take a lot of this out of your day, which is your shoulders, your neck, your arms, your forearms, your wrists, that whole body fatigue that you feel through there, it's not actually turning the bike forward. So getting your tyre pressures right is a very important thing. Anybody who's got tubeless here? No? Okay. If you did, yeah. If you do, make sure you top up the sealant. It's pretty simple. Put your tubeless tyres on, they're great, they've got a liquid running around in there, and then 3-4 months later it's dried out, you get a puncture, nothing's going to flow into that hole. Same with your mountain bike. So just make sure you top up the sealant, you're better off with more than less.
Itself, with any big event, ultra related, cycling, running, triathlon, along those sort of lines, with the athletes that I work with, it's all about finding a template that you are comfortable with, that you can replicate for hours on end. So I usually get an athlete to come up with an hour or 2-hour template that they can repeat for hours on end, because it's simple and easy to follow. And if they're consistent with that, they're also very consistent with their carbohydrate, electrolyte and fluid intake as well. These days, most of the research from a performance point of view is centering around carbohydrate intake, and interestingly, probably less so from an electrolyte imbalance. I guess, the common question I get asked is, why do we cramp? Does anyone know why we actually cramp? Interestingly, from a research point of view, the main person that's going to help you is yourself in terms of reducing your risk of cramps, i.e. get fitter, okay? Which makes complete sense that if you're only doing 50, 60k rides on the flat in the lead up to dams, and then come race day you do a ride that's 2-3 times the distance that you normally do, and then you compound that with stress in the system even more by doing a lot of climbing, the muscles are going to fatigue quite quick and then they're going to cramp. Okay, so being as well conditioned to race day as you can is really important, as well as strength specific exercise. And then the second most common reason you're most likely going to cramp is actually carbohydrate inadequacy as well, which again makes complete sense that if you're not fit enough, muscles aren't going to fire, they're going to cramp, and then if you're not providing the muscles with enough fuel, they're probably not going to fire as well, and then you're going to cramp. And then interestingly, but the evidence is still really mixed from an electrolyte imbalance and sodium point of view, that does have a bit of possibility, but the two big ones from a cramp risk point of view is carbohydrate inadequacy and get fitter. Okay, so two really simple ones to take away from today. I do like a carbohydrate based drink, and I believe that Pure is the sponsor, so I think they provide about 26 grams of carbohydrate or thereabouts per bottle. That's a good start. Again, there's no recommendations now for how much we should drink an hour, for the obvious reason of different temperatures, humidities, sweat rates, for example. I wish there was a set amount that we should be aiming for an hour, but there's just so many variables. I do find that sweet spot is around 300 to 500 mils as a starting point, and maybe potentially a little bit more than that. Being cyclists compared to runners and triathletes, whereby we're running off the bike, we don't run the risk of as many gut issues as runners and triathletes, because we're in a stable position and our gut's not bouncing up and down. But starting with a carbohydrate-based drink and trying to get 400 to 500 mils of carbohydrate-based sports drink per hour is a good start, because then that's going to give you about 30 grams of carbohydrate just from drinking each hour, and then trying to get more carbohydrates derived from, say, a gel and a sports bar, a chocolate bar of some description, and sort of alternating that every half an hour. Before you know it, you're probably in the 60 to 90 gram of carbohydrate realm. For what we're doing on race day, we're not racing at the Tour de France. I think the 60 to 90 gram range is probably a good starting point. You are seeing pro cyclists really pushing the limit these days in terms of carbohydrate intake to maximise performance, as much as 120 grams of carbohydrate these days, but I think for what we're trying to achieve, 60 to 90 grams is a good starting point. Now, what we've got to consider with digesting fuel under the stress of cycling exercise is that the gut's highly trainable. So the more we train our gut to tolerate X amount of fuel under X stressor, the more adapted and efficient it becomes. So probably 9 times out of 10 with people that come to see me with gut issues is they're just simply not training their gut enough in training, and then come race day, they work harder than ever and they potentially have more fuel than ever. They're anxious in general, they're stressed on race day. You can see how it's a bit of a double-edged sword and compounding effect. So really important to not only train specifically to the terrain for the dams, but to also replicate your race nutrition. So, you know, as triathletes in particular, we have race simulations whereby we're mimicking race conditions and intensities. We're also really good at having our race day fuel as well. And to me, if you're having your race day fuel often, you're also going to perform better, not finish your sessions as depleted, and maximise recovery as well. I love a chocolate bar. You guys can all get them for about $1 from the supermarket. Dare I say, all you guys don't mind a chocolate bar, okay? There's all different flavours and textures and that sort of thing. So, you know, we could go as simple as alternating between a gel and a chocolate bar every half an hour, plus the sports drink. If we do the maths, all of a sudden we're probably getting 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour. I reckon that's a really good range. And then when you do get to an aid station, if you wanted to have something in addition to, that's completely fine. But let's just not go out thinking, oh yeah, we won't have much, and then we'll have a snack at the aid station, not have much again, deplete your energy stores, have something again, and be up and down all day with energy. So in theory, we don't need the aid stations for the dams because we're as self-sufficient as possible. The only reason the aid stations are really there to top up water and sports drink, because we obviously can't carry that amount on the bike. Race morning, I like to keep it low fibre, low residue. So toast, crumpets, English muffins, pikelets is what I sort of lean to, particularly for race day or a key event. Some athletes like cereal and porridge and oats and that sort of thing, but technically they are high in fibre, high in fat, high in protein, so it can increase your risk of gut issues and make you feel a bit heavier in the stomach. Nothing better than getting out of bed and having a strong coffee first thing before a race. I love my cold brew coffee. I have a couple of coffees before. Caffeine's the most researched supplement on the planet. Decreases the perception of pain, liberates your fat stores for fuel, improves performance. I reckon it's going to be pretty handy on race day. I'd also consider maybe a caffeine gel once or twice across the ride to perk you up. We don't need a huge amount of caffeine to get a performance benefit, usually 1 to 3 milligrams per kilo of your body weight. So just try and get a caffeine gel that's potentially at least 80 milligrams of caffeine. Some gels say they have caffeine in them, but if you look at the actual amount, it might only be 20 to 30 milligrams, which isn't really getting you much benefit. So try and find a gel such as Coda, Winners, Morton gels, which all have about 100 milligrams of caffeine, SAS as well. So yeah, keep your nutrition for race day really simple. Don't overcomplicate things. Any questions stemming from that? Yep.
Do you have to reduce your caffeine prior to an event?
Great question. So they have done studies and they've found that refraining from caffeine doesn't have an amplified benefit come race day, which is great news because you'd see athletes crawl their way to race day because they haven't had a coffee all week and then think they get an amplified benefit. But yeah, if you're a habitual coffee drinker, you're not going to get a crazy benefit from refraining and then having it on race day. So
Great answer.
yes.
What about sort of a couple of days before leading into the race, you know, just...
Yeah, so hopefully through a natural taper, you're naturally going to replenish your glycogen stores. The day before, I'd most definitely be focusing on mostly carbohydrates with a little bit of protein. And again, good news, probably wouldn't even worry about fruit or veggies the day before the race, because what's important the day before the race is as much carbohydrates without overwhelming your gut with too much fibre. So I'd definitely be leaning towards white rice, white bread, low fibre carbohydrate choices, and even sports drink, lollies, even soft drink to get the carbohydrates in. Because if you are to carbo load properly with just food, you have to have a lot of it. So an easy way of having a moderate amount of food but still getting enough carbohydrate in is adding in sports drink, lollies, soft drink, ginger beer, etc. to get the carbohydrate up.
So just the day before sort of thing?
I just do the day before, yeah.
For that 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrate in chocolate, are you talking like full 90 gram? Or
Yeah, I go like a 50 gram chocolate bar that you can get from the end of the supermarket aisle or at the service station, that sort of thing. Cherry Ripes, Milky Ways, Bounty Bars, Turkish Delight. As you can see, I do a lot of research. All work really well. Yeah, I just keep them in the freezer and whack them in my back pocket, and yeah, usually they do the trick.
And what about when it's really hot?
Yeah,
What do you-
in summer I probably lean more towards, muesli bars, rice bars, K-time bars, those sort of things. But yeah, in winter I rub my hands together because I can explore all the different chocolates. And I guess what you gotta remember with the DAMS ride is the most primary goal on the DAMS ride is fuel. Okay, so the easiest way to get that in is, you obviously more refined chocolate bars and muesli bars and rice bars. Okay, it's certainly not a day to be worrying about, making a homemade nut and dried fruit and cacao and coconut thing, which might be okay in theory, but there's a lot of fat, protein, fibre that comes with it if you're munching on that all day. So yeah, as is often the case, sports nutrition is all about context, okay? And what's most important on the DAMS ride is getting easy to digest carbohydrates in.
What about the fat content of the chocolate bars?
Yeah, they're not too bad. They're still only around 5 to 10 grams, which you can handle across the road.
Just with regards to the digestion of it?
You should be fine. Yeah, we're pretty lucky as cyclists in that we're non-weight bearing. Our stomach's pretty stable, so yeah, we can afford to have a bit of a variety there.
Can I just ask a question about balancing the carb
Yep.
load before the ride compared to during the ride?
Yep.
I often have quite a sizable breakfast, sort of an hour or more before I start.
Yep.
It's never been a problem from a gut point of view.
Great.
And I don't have much when I'm riding.
Mm-hmm.
What do you reckon about that? Should I cut down the breakfast and spread it out a bit during the ride?
I'd be doing both. The greater the intensity, the greater the carbohydrate need. And the DAMS ride's naturally going to increase the intensity because you're climbing. Okay, so the more your heart rate's peaking, the greater the carbohydrate demand. So, as I say to athletes, if you're ever umming and ahhing between slightly more or less on the bike, always have slightly more. I only see performance benefits from it and recovery benefits as well. Because if you are getting off the bike completely depleted and famished, it's certainly a sign that you're not having enough during your rides, that's for sure. Do you have a question?
Yeah, any tricks to like going to the toilet before the event and stuff, or instead of
Coffee always gets the bowels going for me. Yeah, hopefully the day before, if you are cutting back the fibre, it's not so much of an issue race day.
I've recently started putting bicarb soda in my water.
Yep.
And electrolytes.
Yep.
And it actually stops me having to go as well because it retains water.
Yep.
I'm trying to learn how to balance it now as to how much I put in so I don't come back completely waterlogged.
Yep.
But it does help dramatically for us older blokes that have to normally go a lot.
Yep.
Every half hour I have to go because I take so much water in. But with some sodium in there, it really holds it. Is there anything?
So touching on sodium, there's very little evidence for sodium loading, like carbohydrate loading, because you're just going to excrete it. But an acute dose of sodium the morning of the race is going to help you retain fluid better. So when you do have your toast, I'll be quite liberal with the amount of sodium you're adding to the toast, which is going to help favour hydration.
You're supposed to eat throughout the ride, basically, because you kind of like need the energy, like half before you need the energy.
Yeah.
Just keep
Do what I say early on, do what you want to do later on. Okay? Alright, so being really consistent with the ride early on when you're less stressed and you can digest fuel efficiently and you're staying on top of things, and then use your intuition later on. So if you feel like you got it pretty right and you want to slightly dial it back towards the end, I'm okay with that scenario compared to the first 3 hours, right, let's hold on to this wheel, no time to eat, and then all of a sudden face a mountain and be pedaling squares towards the back end.
Just avoid protein on race day. It's just purely for a recovery perspective.
It's not really needed on race day. Certainly, if you want to have a little bit of protein to keep satisfied and add a bit of flavour to the meal, that's fine. But yeah, primary goal is carbohydrate.
If you're riding with 2 bottles and now you decide to ride with a carbohydrate in the 1 bottle,
Yep.
what do you stick in the other bottle? Water or electrolyte?
Carbohydrate, okay? Because the carbohydrate drink has water in it, obviously, as well.
Yeah.
So just water on race day isn't really serving a purpose.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, the carbohydrate drink is all in one.
Oh, okay. So no electrolyte tablets and...
Now the carbohydrate drink's going to have a bit of electrolytes in it
some
anyway.
food, Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's an all-in-one.
Yep.
So yeah, Damian Oldmeadow is my name. I'm the Managing Director of Star Physio. I've been a physio for frighteningly almost 30 years now, and I've been involved with cycling and certainly elite cycling for about 25 of those years, and I grew up on a bike. I worked in a bike shop as a kid, so I've sort of hung around bikes for a pretty long time. When I worked in Canberra at the Institute of Sport for a couple of years, I was very fortunate to be exposed to interestingly, not going across there as a physio to work with cycling, but because there was no one else knew anything about it, I worked out quickly that when this bloke by the name of Cattle Evans came in, as I've called him, as a teenager who had just won his first mountain bike World Cup, the boss at the Institute realised I knew a bit about bikes, and that just led me down a path where I got to work with all the best biomechanists and then ended up working with British cycling. And so I've had a nice ride in cycling, and I think the thing I'm always, I guess, proud of what I and we as a clinic do is we're very interested in how evidence changes, how research comes along and how things change. And I'm sure most of you guys, I mean, even when it comes to performance on the bike and you look at the shape of spokes and the shape of the bike, and I was just chatting earlier about tyre pressure and tyre size, and for any of you who've ridden bikes for a long time, I mean, my early racing days, and I was never a great cyclist, but I had a crack. We were at 18mm tyres at 120, 130 psi, and your fillings would fall out almost on a smooth road. And I've just had some new tyres put on this, and I'm on 28s, and at 95 kilos, I'm at 78 psi. Is what appears to be the right, and it's. And my head still doesn't really compute as to why. I know the science, I don't fully understand why, but it is. So we adapt, and both in physiotherapy and the way we look at position on a bike, there's been massive changes in the last 15 years or so. And so I'm here to talk a bit about what you can do to hopefully maximise your experience and enjoyment and performance on the day. We're interested in injury prevention, and as I say again and again to athletes of every level, the number one thing that's going to give you a shitty event is an injury. It really, really is. And as a cyclist, it's a unique sport. We're fixed to the bike, and Richard mentioned it earlier. We're fixed to the bike, 5 contact points, 2 hands, 2 feet, and the saddle there. And because of the motion of the cranks, we are fixed in the motion we do. We've got to be able to grab our brakes when there's 1,000 odd people out there as well. So how your body sits in relation to the bike as a cyclist is the number one injury risk in cycling. The second big injury risks are training errors. We're thankfully far enough out, and hopefully you guys are already spending some reasonable time on the bike there, but the classic athletes I always joke about that are very important for our business are the yo-yo athlete who starts raining, they do nothing at all across winter, they put on 10 or 15 kilos, and then spring comes and they go and do 500 k's in the first week. And their fitness and strength has gone down to here, then they've asked this out of their body, and particularly if they're over 35 or 40, the body just doesn't tolerate that big change there. So, I guess when we're looking at things to think about for injury prevention, consistency of training, gradually increasing load, and being realistic in your goals, I think is a really, really nice thing. And I'll steal the line off James, one of my colleagues in here, who's one of the Australian triathlon coaches, and he always says that we overestimate what we can achieve in a year, and we underestimate what we can achieve in 10. And the endurance sports in particular, they're a long game. And if you look at the best cyclists in the world and the best triathletes in the world in the longer form, a lot of them hit their peaks, into their 30s and beyond. Outside maybe Slovenians who have got something special in the water apparently. So we won't jump up and down about that. So Julie, James, and myself are all involved in the bike fit. Julie's just come back from her first Hawaii Ironman World Championships. James has been a pro triathlete in the past. I'm probably the worst athlete out of the lot, but they'll never catch up to me on experience, thankfully, so until I retire. So yes, this is what we do. So we're going to try not to keep you here too long, but I just want to help you guys with some ideas about things to think about with your own bike positions, talk about what we do, talk about some of the flaws in the traditional bike fitting process. Now, I know a couple of faces around here who've been and seen what we've done in here. We'll give you a couple of examples now. Quickly about the science of cycling. Now, we're about to go and embark on a course with some fairly serious climbing. So, how important is body weight in cycling? How important is the weight of your bike? And interesting, you're talking about fluid and nutrition kind of stuff and talking about maintaining fluid. Well, if you're maintaining fluid and you're putting on a few kilograms there, that actually can have quite a detrimental performance on hills. For the typical Perth cyclist who doesn't go and do the dams and does a lap around the river, at 40 k's an hour, which plenty of us do in a group ride around the river there, a kilo saving, you'll save 1 second over an hour on the bike. A lot of people think spending a couple of $1,000 on a new set of wheels to save a kilo will have a much bigger effect there. So on the flat, it doesn't make much difference. Start climbing hills, it does, okay? And again, you look at the Tour de France finishes some years when there's 16 seconds across the 3 podiums and that second can be important at that level. For most of us, the weight of the bike or the weight of you is probably a little bit less, and you can spend a lot of money trying to change how much things weigh. The next thing we're very interested in, aerodynamics. This is where it really happens on a bike, okay? The important thing to understand is it's an exponential equation versus speed. The faster you go, the more important aerodynamics is. 25 k's an hour, aero is about 65 to 75% of what stops you moving forward. 40 k's an hour, it's heading up towards 85-90% of what happens when you're moving forward, if you're on the front of the group, or you're time trialling and there's no one in front of you there. And for anyone who watches the Tour de France and that kind of thing with the real-time telemetry these days, you see that in the right part of a peloton, you're actually putting out sometimes only 50% of what the guy on the nose is doing there. So, you know, you'll hear Bill and everyone talk about it's not a race, we don't want big pelotons forming. The reality is in a ride like the Dams, groups will form. The challenge is to pick the group that you're suited to and that kind of thing, and to try and be the heroes who sits on the front unless you're in the group that you're just the strong man on, because there's massive advantages to be sitting back behind. So, number one thing that stops us moving well is an injury there. It's a pretty crappy slide, I'll tell you how bad that was. The interesting thing when you look at most of the science around injuries in cycling is it all comes out of hospitals. And if you look at the research that you can read about it, it all talks about facial fractures and arm fractures and bits and pieces. There's physiotherapists in here. Knees, low back, neck and shoulders are probably the most common thing people come in complaining about issues with. And then as we ask questions, more particularly in the bike fit process, hand numbness, foot numbness, and then the stuff that often they don't talk about very well, saddle issues. Females more susceptible to sores, guys getting susceptible to numbness, which can then lead as far as erectile dysfunction. Females are fantastic, and sadly I've only got one in the group. I've got 3 daughters and a wife. Women are great at asking for directions. When they get problems, they ask for help. We all try and fix it ourselves as blokes there. And so sadly, when we start dealing with guys with have gone as far as erectile dysfunction and things like that, they've already spent thousands of dollars after Googling all sorts of stuff, and they've never got the right sort of information there. So saddle sores and issues with the saddle are a massive issue, and we'll chat a bit more about them. Oh, there we go, that's how it's meant to work. You can see those numbers there. Okay, so what's a bike fit? Who's had a bike fit before? Half you? Good, okay. So, traditional bike fitting was about angles and lengths and reaches. And the magic knee over pedal spindle, or COPS. Everyone's seen the plumb bobs hanging before, and even the retool systems and the BG fit and Specialised fit, they use a laser to say that your knee needs to be over the middle of the pedal spindle. Now, about 15 years ago, the little bit of research that suggested that was important was completely disproven. The research had huge holes in it. Now, it's not to say that that's a bad position for people, but what we really understand now is it has no determination on performance nor on injury risk, and particularly for us when we commonly are dealing with our middle-aged male cyclists with crappy hip flexibility, it gives us a real ability to move them forward across the bike with absolute knowledge that there's no injury risk increasing there, and we improve reach, we improve comfort at the hips, we improve back pain, hip pain, bits and pieces there. So with the knee angle, what we know is it's extremely inaccurate to measure. Even within the same day with the same bike fitter measuring it, they can't get back within 5 degrees of their own measurement, and it's highly variable between what you need and what you need and what I need there. So there's some flaws. Now, if you're young or young at heart and fit, if you're flexible, if you're strong, you have a window that's nice and big, and you can probably ride in a lot of positions and get away with it. If you've had injuries, if you've got flexibility issues, if you've got age catching up with you a little bit there, that window starts shrinking down. And I guess that's where our role as physios, particularly if there's pain involved, comes in. And we spend a lot of time off the bike working out what the issues are. And before we even get near the bike, we're already thinking, right, these are the kind of things we've got to work around. Things I've said are up there. Okay, so what do? So about 12 years ago, I was at an international conference in London, and I met this group called Jabeamised, and they were just starting to play around with saddle pressure and looking at what happened at the saddle. And I was doing a bit of work with British cycling. We're having some issues with some of the women who are having saddle pain. Australia went, this is what we need to understand because we're guessing about that. So it was a fairly serious investment. We decided to get involved with it there. We've now moved forward to looking at contact pressure analysis at the feet, at the hands, or at the elbow cups in our triathletes. And the big one we look at bike fit now is you've got a certain amount of body weight that's got to be distributed across 5 contact points. We cannot make that body weight go anywhere else. It's got to be in one of those 5 points. Now, if you've got good power to weight ratio and you put out high power relative to your weight across a ride, a lot of that weight is in your feet, which is great as far as your saddle and your hands go load, but sometimes it means cleat position, the bed in your shoes, shoe size, and that becomes really, really critical there. If you are a less good power weight athlete, and I guess a lot of the middle-aged people I see in here who are carrying a bit of weight, don't put out a lot of power there, the saddle needs to do a lot of work. And if that saddle is not either the right shape or in the right position, that's where we see lots and lots of problems. The interesting thing is, for some reason, some people are more tolerant of discomfort in the saddle and don't get sores, but what they do is they shift their weight somewhere else. And years ago, when someone said, I get hand numbness and neck and shoulder pain on the bike, we think, oh, it's a drop issue or it's a reach issue. What we see now with our ability to measure all these things is nearly always they're not supported on their saddle properly. Or where they're sitting on their saddle, they're getting high pressure. And what that means is that causes pain, so they hold themselves at the arms. Over a couple of hours, the hands go numb, and then that pressure ends up through the neck and shoulders there as well. So it's really, really interesting, you know, in my 25 odd years of doing bike fit, we say it again and again, it's the stuff we can't see that's really, really important now. And I say again, I just don't know how I did bike fitting well without this. But I had 15 years of fitting bikes from people that most of them were happy enough as far as I know. So that's good. So a couple of presentations. So we'll talk about saddle pain there. So there's lots of different shaped saddles, and there's lots of shops that will sell you a saddle, and quite a few. Has anyone sat on an arsometer at one of the bike shops before, where they measure your sit bones and bits and pieces there, and they specialise, are really big into them there. And they're measuring the width of your sit bones roughly in a passive position. When you're not pedalling, you're not across the bars and that kind of thing. And I see lots and lots of people come in on saddles that are just wrong, but they've been told they're right and they believe they're right because they were measured in the shop. Unfortunately, they are sales gimmicks. And the brain is really powerful. If you're told this is the right saddle for you, and you get on it and you are someone who's tolerant of different size and shapes up, it probably will be fine and you'll believe it's fine there. But for certain people, it just doesn't work. Now, the interesting thing here, and I'm just going to grab one of these for example. For some reason, now this is a specialised power saddle. Anyone ride a specialised power saddle? Yeah. For some reason, Specialised decided what they need to do was make saddles that were really wide at the back and quite a triangular shape. This is actually one of the newer ones where they've cut it out a little bit more, but it's still quite triangular. And what we're seeing really, really commonly with these is people can't get their thighs either side of the wings here. And either they come in with saddle pain or they come in with neck and shoulder pain. And interestingly, it's more commonly neck and shoulder pain. And as soon as we do a saddle map, and I'll show you one in a sec up on here, it shows that people are sitting right on the nose here because they just can't get their thighs back around them. And the interesting thing, what we know is, or the international group we work with on this, our global statement is 80% of saddle discomfort is the saddle's in the wrong position, 20% is the wrong saddle. But blokes in particular, the first thing they do if they get saddle discomfort, they buy a new saddle. And once a month, I reckon I have someone coming here with 2.5 grand's worth of saddles in a duffel bag and say, Damo, just tell me which one's the right saddle. And they've never had a proper fit, and they've never got that right there. So it's interesting. Now, I'm not here to bag Specialised saddles, but Giant, who almost are proud of the fact they copy whatever the latest trends are, and they're a big enough company that no one sues them for it. Giant, just in the last season or so, have gone to a very triangular shaped saddle. And I had Jess Allen, working with Jess Allen earlier this year, who's our only female pro in Perth, and they've just swapped to Giant bikes, and she's a fairly small girl with a fairly small pelvis. We tried every single saddle in the Giant range, in every single position we could go through. She could not get back on one without getting saddle pain. So, UCI rules, sponsorship rules, all sorts of wonderful things. We had to write all sorts of letters to get her an exemption to ride a different saddle that she could get back on. When we got on the right saddle, it was just like Christmas for her. So, saddles are a really, really interesting area, but if you're getting saddle discomfort, remember that the first thing is that it's going to be about where you're sitting on. Now, this is a really common picture we see. So, red is high pressure. Now, if you're getting red, if you're a big guy in particular, and you're getting red back here on the sit bones, no problem. They're designed to take that kind of load. When we start seeing red, particularly in this frontal area here, this is typically where saddle pain or saddle sores start developing through here. And again, this commonly pushing back, having to move back to try and get off that front of the saddle area there is a really common thing. Now, this is an example of the same saddle on the same bike on the same day. So our first thing we try and do is go, can we work with the saddle we've got there? And this is a really, really nice example where, and I know on this one, so classic issue we see, nose of saddle too low. So first thing, if any of you are getting either saddle pain, neck and shoulder pain or hand numbness, have a look at the angle of your saddle first. Because the most common thing is it's nose down. Now blokes in particular, we think, I don't want to get pressure in my important parts at the front, I'm going to drop the nose down. But what tends to happen there is we slip onto the nose and we then use our hands to hold us back on the saddle there as well. When you bring the nose up, rather than increasing the pressure on the front, it actually makes you sit on the back of the saddle. So the interesting thing, like with that power there, on people that it's the wrong shape saddle for, and it's not just the power, there's a few other ones around there, we'll go through all sorts of positions, and sometimes if I'm immediately concerned it's the wrong shape saddle, I'll put them a couple of degrees nose up, shove it right forward, make them low so they almost have to force themselves back on the saddle just to be able to pedal properly, and we'll still see them sit like that. And that's where I can fairly quickly say, this saddle is just not going to work for you. I'm really sorry you've just paid $300 for it from the shop, but this is never going to work, and we've got some solutions for them that we use as well. So, and the interesting thing, and the other thing we pick up visually, so this is just showing the saddle hanging out of the back on this same fit here. So, as you're sitting back onto it afterwards there. The interesting thing, can you see the knee angle looks the same? The person's body doesn't really look that different. So traditional bike fitting is a side-on camera. And it's the stuff, now, because we're looking at this all the time, we pick up this kind of stuff. But so often, you see people have bike fits and before and after they look almost exactly the same, but the way their support is completely different and how they feel afterwards is also completely different. So, it's a good one. Now, hand numbness, same sort of things. Now, most common cause, poor saddle support. But also, we do pick up, and when we use the technology to measure what's going in here, now this is just showing that there's sometimes high pressures. It's interesting when we then go and look at how the bar tape's wrapped. Sometimes we'll just see bits sticking up, and it's amazing, just a little bit sticking up somewhere. Sometimes, if it's in the wrong space where there's a nerve close to the surface, it can really piss it off really quickly there. So we use the hand measurements for those sort of things as well, and show that we can reduce the pressure down as well. Now, knee pain is always an interesting one there, and why are they getting it worse on the hills when they work harder is a classic one there as well. We always have a look at what's going on and go, right, from a physio perspective, there's strength issues, there's mobility issues, there are things happening there as well. And the knee joint is a complicated joint, but in cyclists, it's usually where the kneecap articulates with the thigh, or occasionally the iliotibial band where it rubs around the outside of the knee. Now, if anyone's getting lateral or outside of knee pain, drop your saddle down is the first thing to do, okay? One of the interesting things that we've learned over the last few years, and even when I refit someone that I fitted 15 years ago, when we used angles to set up bike fits, we put people too high. So anyone that's having fits with angle-based sort of bike fits there, the most common thing we see is they get set too high, and it's an error that the research has shown just happens. I don't quite know why, but it does there. So for many, many years, we thought that all the issues came because the seat was too low when they got knee pain. We're seeing much more issues with the seat being too high causing knee pain. Now, this again was pretty subtle, because when we see this is a pretty damn good saddle map. So there are only very subtle, very subtle changes as we started going through here. This is one that here. And her issue was actually not the bike fit, she was actually weak. And so what we ended up doing, and there is definitely a proportion of people come in here with pain that their bike position is actually pretty good. And that's when we're doing off the bike stuff here as well. And so her issue was when she needed power, she wasn't strong enough to develop it. Now, we see other hulking, powerful guys come in, and often their bike fit is the issue there. So that was an interesting one, that there was nothing wrong with her bike fit. And so we played around with a few different things. Now, Dave's already done lots of nice talking around fuel, so I'm not going to even touch on that any further. But I'm going to very quickly talk to you about lifting weights. Does anyone lift heavy things in between or as part of their cycling training? A couple of excellent, some that want to talk to us before, so it's good. And it's very, very powerful research that says that we can halve the risk of our overuse injuries, which are the #1 things we see in cycling, and 70% reduction in acute muscle injuries, which actually aren't very common in cycling at all. Now, just a quick side note there is, if you're seeing a health professional who's told you you've got a muscle tear from cycling, get a second opinion. Muscle tears happen when there's a rapid rate of change of tension and position. It doesn't happen in cycling. Even if you can do 300 cadence, as some of the British guys used to do in their training and that kind of thing, the rate of change of muscle tension isn't fast enough to tear a muscle there. You'll get pain in muscles, but they're not tears, and it's really, really important to understand there's a difference between damage and pain, very, very significant there. How do you do weights as a cyclist there? The beautiful thing about what we look for in strength conditioning as a cyclist, this is Emma Pooley laying on the ground, who was a world champion in the time trial. Now she was an interesting one from a saddle perspective. She used about 2 centimetres square on the saddle. Never got saddle pain. She weighed 47 kilos and held 300 watts all day. So we talk about that power to weight. Her saddle pretty much just stopped her moving sideways. You know, we really did hardly nothing there. Hers was a really interesting one. So her strength work was all about performance, thankfully. She wasn't getting many injuries there. But lifting weights to benefit your cycling increases your peak power, reduces your perceived exertion for the same power, and allows you to go for longer without fatigue because your strength is higher, so the percentage you're using for the same power is less there. The key things about strength conditioning, and so many people go to the gym and they're already cyclists, and the first thing that goes, I don't need to do leg weights because I ride a bike. Cycling is not strength work. Even using the biggest gear you can push riding up and down Mount Street, you count how many repetitions there are. The strongest guys I know get still over 100 reps to get up there. How many times do you get into a leg press to do 100 reps? Never. It's not strength work. It's still aerobic. You can call it strength aerobic or whatever you want there. It's not strength. Strength and conditioning for cyclists and endurance athletes is about getting in the gym twice a week, lifting heavy things, and our very basic statement is if you can lift it more than 10 times, it's too light. 3 sets of 5 to 6 reps, half a dozen exercises, done. 30-40 minutes twice a week. It's great bang for buck with huge benefits in injury prevention, but also nice performance benefits there as well. So if you're looking for extra things that you can consider that you might add in there, we would suggest definitely get strong. Now, I'll go back to that one there. 6 weeks, how many weeks out are we from the event now? 6 weeks?
9.
9 weeks, okay, 9 weeks.
Yeah.
Gee, that's all right. If you want to get into it, you've probably got just enough time to get some benefit out of it now. But if you're someone who hasn't been in the gym before, you need to start gradually and very gradually start building things up there. The kind of exercises we talk about. Now, very quickly, Chris Hoy, 750 kilograms, we ran out of weights, and his training partner at 82 climbed on board, and you can do the maths on that, it was pretty strong. If you're riding the kind of volume that you need to do for something like the 3 dams, you're not going to grow legs like this. These guys very, very seldom ride it for more than an hour, and most of their stuff was very, very high intensity. They were track sprinters and that kind of thing. But that doesn't mean this isn't appropriate for endurance cyclists. Now, you may not lift quite that amount of weight there, but the flow-on effect is very, very powerful. Favourite exercises. Leg press is a great place to start for relatively inexperienced weightlifters because it's a very safe place, it's a very cycling position, and you can lift very heavy things safely. Leg press, deadlift, calf. 3 leg exercises, done. Pick a couple of big upper body exercises, done. In, out, fast. Start light, build up gradually. We're certainly very happy, and we do a lot of work writing people programs, particularly if there's injuries involved, building them around there as well, and particularly for our busy middle-aged people. I'm not here to judge anyone who's not middle-aged, but you know, writing a program that says, okay, here's your 6-week block. Day A, you're doing 3 sets of 5 on the leg press at 230 kilos, and you open up your spreadsheet, you just do it. So we do lots of that kind of work as well, so I'm more than happy to chat to you about that.
Links in 2018, and from there it's expanded. It seems to be, it's a great venue for a cycling event for a number of reasons, in particular unlimited parking. So what I do, I'll just give you a quick overview. I'm mindful of time. Please just shoot any questions as we go along. As I said, I've been involved with it a fair while. I do have a cycling background, so as much as I run other events, like we're involved with Physio Services and the Boston Festival Triathlon, cycling's probably my baby, and both my granddads raced and every member of both sides of the family pretty much. So let's talk specifics. Rider pack collection is an important thing, obviously. It's where you get your numbers and you get to see everyone else and pick up any other gear that you've ordered or purchased. It's at the Leederville Sporting Club, 78 Cambridge Street, West Leederville. That's the bowling club. There is parking there. As you pull in the gate, there's parking to the right on what used to be old bowling greens. Times are pretty strict. Most importantly, there's no pickup on event day. Okay, we don't have the ability to get through packs on event day, and obviously we try and maximise the time you guys, in particular Group 5, are on the road in the daylight. So you need to get to one of those. Public transport goes straight down Cambridge Street if you need to. We find most people pick up on Friday. The lunch rush on Friday is quite crazy normally, so just give yourself a little bit more time if you're doing that. Okay, Event Village, Champion Lakes, Royal Regatta Centre. What's important there, and it's well signed, is vehicle entries from Champion Drive. So you come in off Tonkin Highway, left into Champion Drive, and you park on, if anyone's ever been there, on the oval that's regularly used for parking beside the main regatta centre. Heaps of parking there, so don't stress too much about time. Always good to get there a bit early, but it's no issue. We manage the parking. We'll have 5 or 6 people out there in the morning managing it, so you can get in there and then into the venue quite quickly. Parking all free. The only thing we do ask is please use the parking in the venue. Obviously that place gets smashed with events, and the residents at the back tend to complain if you're parking on their verge. The ranger will give you a ticket if you're parking on someone's verge all day. Just be mindful of that. Okay, start times very quickly, briefings, etc. 5 dams start at 6:15. Okay, 6:15. It's daybreak just. Okay, we've actually delayed the start by 15 minutes this year just to make sure it's a little bit lighter. If you're doing the 5 dams, which most you are, you're expected to have headlight, tail light. Everyone else is expected to have a tail light on their bike. Turn them on, leave them on. I suggest you run your tail light 24/7 if you ride your bike on the road anywhere. It's a bit like when motorbikes, those older guys like me, when motorbikes first started running permanent headlights, the safety and the numbers of accidents dropped off considerably. Same with the tail light on your bike, just leave it on. 2 dams is next away at 7 AM, and then 3 dams will start from 7:15. Get a lot of questions around that. It's predominantly a safety reason. Okay, what we do, those of you who know the course well, we get the 2 dams guys already off the downhill of Bedfordale on Albany Highway, so they've already finished that before the 5 dams gets there. Because when you get there in the 5 dams, you turn left into Wollongong, you come out of Wollongong and you cross Albany Highway again and go into Churchman's Brook. It just limits the risk of you whacking into a novice 2 dams person who's going down the hill. Okay, so that's the whole reason behind that. And the reason the 3 starts a bit later is just to open that window up and to spread you guys out a little bit on the field. Okay, there is cut-off times. More information will come about that. We're trying to push that out as much as we can. Quickly, 5 dams, average speed required is about 18 kilometres an hour, including your stops. Okay, a little trick that not many people seem to take advantage of is the lunch stop. Your time stops when you enter, and your time starts again when you leave. So you can have a bit longer there, so long as you're inside the cut-off time, which is looking like about 12 o'clock for 5 dams, and then we're going to try and push 3 dams out to 1:30. Same scenario. Cut-off times are created for a lot of reasons. Primarily, we have a duty of care to you guys. If you're going a lot slower than, if you go slower than 18 kilometres an hour at the halfway mark where lunch is, you're starting to go in a problem where, energy depletion, etc. It doesn't matter how many gels you are throwing in or Vegemite sandwiches or whatever your preference is, it starts to get a health issue with that. And same with 3 dams. 3 dams this year we're going to work on an average speed of 15 kilometres an hour. Okay, 15 kilometres an hour, to put that into perspective, Perth Marathon's won at about 17 to 18 kilometres an hour running. Okay, so we should be able to maintain that. Where it works really well is if we get a good easterly in the morning, you get a really good chance to get a tailwind all the way down the Serpentine for 45k, and you get that time well and truly safe within the cold. We cut very few people, and most of them voluntarily get in the bus when we give them the offer. Cool. Sorry I dwelled on that because it just comes up a lot. Okay, rider pack will include your jerseys, your rider guide, your numbering system. There's stickers for your seat bar, which is the important one because that's got your timing chip in it. There's stickers for your helmet. There's instructions with them how to put them on. This year what we're going to do too is when you pick your pack up, We're going to have a bike on display and a helmet on display because people still struggle to get them in the right places, but it's pretty important that that happens. There's an event water bottle, there'll be samples of gels as was discussed with Dave, and then you'll get a wristband. If you've pre-ordered the on-course lunch, you'll probably end up with 2 wristbands, one for that and then one for when you get back to the venue. Lights we discussed, timing, it's a disposable chip and it's in the number that goes behind the seat, so please look after that. And there's a web-based tracking system, you'll get more info about that. So your friends and family can keep an eye on you and make sure you're actually out there. Nice photo, one of the dams. Courses, very similar to previous years. I won't talk too much about them unless you've got questions. There's a slight change. The 2 dams is still 54k, go through to the 3 dams, no change to that from previous years. There is some changes to the 5 dams, okay? Has anyone done the 5 before? Okay, that's right, won't bore you with changes because you won't know about them anyway. So, in order, the 5 dams, I think comes up on the next page. We'll go through the actual dams you hit. There we go. Okay, let's talk 5 dams. First dam's Serpentine, obviously, which is at about the 55k mark, start climbing into there. Wollongong is your second dam at about 110 kilometres. We go across the road to Churchman's Brook and pick up that one as the third, quite early. New one for 2023, which I hope is going to work really well, is Bickley Reservoir. It's in the back of Orange Grove there, really easy to get to at the end of Maddington Road if you guys are out training, and it's only about 2 kilometres long. So if you want to go up and have a look, it is relatively narrow, and there's actually some residents along there, but we'll deal with them, and it'll just be a matter of you guys riding single file up and down, and all will be good. And then the big kicker is you then come down, because obviously these have all got hills, but there's all hills in between. After Bickley Reservoir, we send you on the bottom of Washable Road Hill, you ride all the way up Washable Road, through the back of Canning Road, etc., until you get into Canning Dam as your final one, then you'll descend down the big hill into town.
Are these slides on the website?
Yes, yeah, and the rider guide will have all this information as well. I think the idea of standing in front of the camera is they'll put this up soon as well, info-wise. Is that it?
Yep.
Easy. Right, hit me. What else do you need to know?
There's a few more.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. St John's will be our medical provider once again, just for info as much as anything. We run a support vehicle, not that I call them ambulances. We run a support vehicle at the back of each event. We have a static one set up at the event village, and then we have another one at Bedfordale Lunch. The vehicle we use for the 2 dams, once that finishes, because that only takes a few hours, they get sent back out on course. And this year, we're looking at additionally, we'll have a response vehicle with a paramedic in it. Okay, so there's plenty of medical. Okay, sometimes, depending on where you are, it might take a little while. And what do we do if it's something that's not going really well, a situation that's a bit worse? Triple O. Okay, if it's an emergency situation, treat it as a normal thing as if you come across a mate hurt on the side of the road. Big thing there is, obviously sometimes you might get caught waiting for someone. We'll get to you as quick as we can. Mobile service is pretty good, and I've got a team of 30 staff, and we'll be sending them in. There's guys on motorbikes, so we'll be doing our best. As long as you've called through and there is an event control number, we have someone, their sole job as they sit at the start finish to monitor that phone. Okay, so you'll get a response quite quickly. If you're having trouble getting phone reception, try texting. Your number, the number of what the situation is and where you are. Okay, and then we'll get someone on the way. Mobile phones, yep, everyone's expected to carry a mobile phone. As we said, there's some areas where mobile reception is bad, but it's actually pretty good most of the way now. Cool. We've spoken about...
Tell your story. You've always got to tell your story about the people that don't send the SMS after they withdraw to it.
Yeah, good point. Good time to bring it up. If you withdraw, you have to let us know, okay? One of the reasons I pushed to move from Curtin Uni as the venue is it was my first time as event manager. I spent 2 hours on my mountain bike in the dark, backtracking along the path because we lost 2 guys. Okay? Eventually we found one by his next of kin wife. The second one they finally found sitting on the lounge drinking beer at his house because he just jumped on the train at the stop and he'd had enough and he jumped on the train and went home. Didn't tell us, didn't know anything. And I was literally riding along with a torch because I thought it's fallen off the path because we had it. Last stop was down south on the freeway through the timing chip, and I'm looking under bushes, looking at this guy who was enjoying beers while I was running the wrong way. Okay, Richard spoke to you about that. The motorbike guys, we give them a pack with tubes, gas cylinders, and that's about it really, okay? So anything seriously mechanical, on the phone again. It's not a fully supported race. You're not in the Tour de France. The team car's not going to come up, pull up beside you and give you your brand new Sabello to go for the rest of the way. Okay, so you just need to be mindful of that. And you know, I'm not plugging anyone, but reaching out to someone like Richard, obviously, and getting the bike properly serviced before was a good thing. You invested not only a lot of money to be here on the start line of this, you invested a lot of time. Okay, especially if you're prepared to finish the 5 days. There's a lot of time involved. A set of brand new tyres is a pretty small investment if it's going to stop 3 punches during the day. I was the bike manager for Ironman in December down south, came across this girl on the side of the road, had a flat front tyre. I was on a motorbike, pulled up. Luckily for them, they have on-course mechanics, called the mechanic up. So I'll just help her while I was there, took the front tyre off for her, waiting for the guy, checked the back, and she had like 30 PSI in the back tyre. I said, how'd you pump these up? Oh, I got serviced 4 weeks ago. She'd flown to Sydney with a family, the kids, everything to do the Ironman, and she hadn't even pumped the tyres up to do her Ironman race. And wondered, and was surprised when I said, oh, nearly everyone else here would have checked these this morning, let alone 4 weeks previous. Make all that stuff done. We spend a lot of time on Sunday morning fixing bikes for people who've turned up with issues, so please be mindful of that. But Richard will be there until the last rider starts, so reach out to him. If not, grab one of us in Hy-Vis. Most of us are cyclists or ex-cyclists. We've got some idea how to help you if you need to. Broom wagon, in other words, that's the bus that picks you up if you're having a bad day. People have bad days. There's always another dam, there's always another bike ride. If you're having a shocker, for whatever reason, if instead of trying the gels from now on, you decide to try them on the morning the first day and you have, gut issues with them or whatever, don't be afraid to go, this is not for me today, I need to get in the bus. Okay? And then we will then coordinate to either meet the bus, bring you back to site, or allow you to ring someone and meet at the next checkpoint, etc., etc. We get really busy in the afternoon. Last year's DAMS 2021, we picked up about 60 people. Okay, so you might, again, have to be a little patient, but sit in the bus watching the others, and I try and find friendly people to drive the buses, so you always got someone to talk to. So broom wagon thing, we won't stress around that too much. They again make to provide mechanical support. Trouble with the broom wagons, they're normally driving on the cut-off time anyway. So if you're sitting with them for half an hour because you're trying to fix a broken chain, you're probably not going to make the next time to go forward. Right, directional signage. To put it in perspective, we send 6 people out, two on each course, and they spend the whole day, whole Saturday. The 5 dams guys leave the venue at 7 AM on Saturday morning, and they get back to me at about 5:30 Saturday afternoon. All they do is put out signs for you guys. If you go the wrong way, you haven't looked up. It's as simple as that. And the way we sign corners and intersections is we'll have a bright fluoro green arrow before the corner, and we'll always have one after the corner. So you come up the corner, it's pointing that way, yeah, I'm on the right way because there's one beyond that. Okay, keep up for that. The only thing, and there's only a few spots where there's a separation of 5 dams, 3 dams, that sort of thing, but those signs are quite clear as well. All the maps are downloadable in a couple of files via the website, so you should be able to add them into your Garmin's or your Strava or whatever you want to do. But I cannot tell how much goes into that sign. It's ridiculous. There's hundreds of arrows. It's so much that West Cycle and Sam keep hassling me for the signage bill every year because I think, we need more, we need to do this more. Okay, and there's warning signs as well. The bad descents. If you see a steep descent ahead sign, or in particular a caution sign, it's there for a reason. It normally is there because someone donated their clavicle to that corner a couple of years ago, like most cyclists do at some point. Okay, we had an incident. Guy came off Wollongong Dam. And it used to be the lunch stop 3/4 of the way down the descent. You used to have to pull into the lunch stop, which we got rid of. But he virtually demanded we pay for his bike when he fell off. But he videoed it. So when he met us to show us the video and, you should be paying all this sort of stuff, 11 signs we counted from the pan to where he went off of either arrows or slow down signs or caution signs. And he just hadn't looked. He was embarrassed when he showed us. That's great. So, signage everywhere. Cool. That's pretty good. Yeah, as I said, there'll be colour-coded ones, and the colours of the signs, as long as our printer's on time and Sam and I have got our stuff together, will be colour-coded to your event. So, 5 Dams is red, so your numbers will be red, the jerseys will be red, and the signs will be red. Okay, so pretty simple. Cool. Sorry, I'm trying to go as quick as I can. Rubbish, that's a real issue for cyclists, a real issue. We're trying to politely say, just put it in your pocket, okay? But it's gone beyond that now. We've had to actually say, if you're seen intentionally discarding rubbish at somewhere other than one of the pit stops, you may be removed from the event. Ironman, it is automatic disqualification if you're deemed to throw a gel packet into the side of the road. Okay, and when I was at Ironman in December, they disqualified 4 guys for it. 3 guys and 1 female for it. Okay, so please do the right thing for those roads. This event is very watercorp sensitive. Okay, the hoops we have to jump through, we have to do terrace risk assessments, we have to do, it's so much. Our risk management plan for this event is about 240 pages, and most of that evolves around access to the dams. We're going into 2 dams this year that are not open to the public, being Canning and Wollongong. They're behind closed gates and we get dry there. So please, the only issue they have is the risk of contamination of water. So they're worried about a bin, they're worried about a gel packet. So please just do the right thing there, that'd be great.
Does that include banana skins?
What do we think? What's
Like,
the general pub rule, guys? What do you reckon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does, yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good question. I would have said no, so glad everyone else said yes. Yeah, it's... okay.
And public perception of cyclists is so shit anyway.
Exactly.
We just don't want to give them any excuse.
And it's not that far to the next one. Even if you're not stopping to redo it, if you sort of drop it near one of the bins, you'll see them quite easily as you pull up the pit stops. That'll be good. Okay, it's not a race. Okay, that's one of the most important things. I struggle with that because if you put a number on and you're timed, for me it's a race, but it is not a race. And from a operational point of view, what that means is we don't have a temporary suspension of the Road Traffic Act, which is what you require to have a race. Okay, so we're running with Sam and I running the Perth Criterium on the 12th of March, quick plug there in the middle of Northbridge on Sunday afternoon. Elite guys coming from over east, pubs on 3 of the corners, all that sort of stuff. See you there. 12th of March it is, starts about lunchtime. Anyway, for that, I have to apply for a road closure application and what they call a temporary suspension of the Road Traffic Act to allow for a peloton, in other words, more than 2 wide. So be mindful, we don't have this for this event, because to close the roads properly for 5 dams and make it that sort of event, the ballpark figure from the traffic management company is about 350 grand, just to make it to that next level. So we're abiding by the road rules everywhere, okay? There's a couple of places on course where, to assist the safety, we have stop slows. In other words, our traffic management company will stop cars approaching. And one of those, for example, is where you cross Brookton Highway, just before the fun part of going up Peak Road, which if any of you have been training will know, it's like 18%. So we manage you across there, but please treat it as an open road on your normal rides, okay? Maximum 2 abreast. One thing we do request is when you're climbing any of the big hills, please try and ride single file on the big hill, because that's where we have the most issue with cars. If you're doing 10 kilometres an hour, for example, up Kingsbury Drive, which is not a bad pace, if you're too wide there, it's a real problem for a car to get past. So single file up the climbs, otherwise obey the road rules. Yes, so no pelotons, no 3 wide, all that sort of thing. Course updates, we've already done, I've done 2 laps of the course this year already, the full course. That'll end up being 6 or 7 by the time race day. We run.
And you ran them, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, in the past life maybe. We run what we call a sweep car. So, especially if you guys doing the 5 dams, we have a car half an hour in front of you on the road, checking the signs that went out the day before, making sure no trees are falling over it, that sort of thing. And they stay at the front. They stay at the pace. They stay at about that half-hour window, and they do the complete 5 dams course, which obviously covers the 3 dams then as well, nearly all of it. It's just another added safety thing that we bring in. Yeah, any updates will come along from there. Right, sorry guys, I know we're getting late. Hopefully that's helpful. Any questions?
It was all Richard Scott.
Anything specific, course-wise, training-wise, nothing?
So can you see that map over lots of the 3 dams, can you see that map that you can hold tonight somewhere?
Can we what, sorry?
Can I see that map somewhere with the actual...
It's on the website now?
It's on the website, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
put a link
website.
up to this, this on the website as well, and gonna put up the videos somewhere, probably a link to YouTube or something similar to that.
And, you know, now, because we've got a bit of time still, 9 weeks out still, what a lot of people do is they break up parts of the course. Don't be embarrassed to drive out there and go, right, I'm going to do the Jarrahdale bit today, and get back in the car and go home, you know, doing the whole thing. Obviously, please don't go past any closed gates on the dams, because that will cause some issues for us. You can, you know, we know people throw their bikes over there, it's under video surveillance, so I'm not going to get the call from the...
How many kilometres is behind the closed gates at the moment?
There's not a lot, there's only probably 4 in total, 5 in total, maybe.
It's just across the road.
Yeah,
But you
it's
have
mainly
to cross
just,
it.
there's
Just
a bit,
get in, yeah.
the Wollongong dams normally, depends on what they're doing with the gates, often they'll have the one at the top of the hill closed, so that, there's probably 4, and then Canning's the other one, so, yeah. Please just respect how hard that is to get, so.
All the information will be coming out in the rider guide,
Yeah.
coming out soon, so all this stuff will be there as well.
But don't be afraid to call and
Yeah, call
ask,
us.
and we'll try and get back to your email, whatever the problem. And most questions we've probably had before. No such thing as a stupid question, just stupid answers sometimes.
What's at the aid stations and how?
Okay, so they're spread quite well in the 5 dams, so about every 40 k's. There's an early one. Have you guys picked up on the, who's doing 5 again? Okay, so a couple of special things for 5 dams. The first aid station is at the 45k mark before you start the first climb. 5 and 3, you can drop a kit there. Okay, you've got to get off. A volunteer will put it in a plastic bag for you. They'll write the number on the bag and we'll deliver it back to Chimney Lakes. The big thing that's really helpful, especially after you chat with Dave tonight, is at the lunch stop, you can drop a bag pre-event, either at race pack collection or on the morning, with your own nutrition, your own bottles, whatever you want, and then it's called valet. So that was called valet. So we run a valet service up to there with your gear. A bit, if you've done anyone's done an Ironman, they call them special needs bags or personal needs bags in Ironman. So if for whatever reason, whether you've got dietary issues or anything like that, you can definitely run one. I strongly suggest using that and reward yourself. Put something in there that's a reward. Like from stuff I've done, it was Turkish delights, because the energy in a Turkish delight is unbelievable. So I never eat them any other time, but knowing that that's there in a few kilometres was quite a good thing. So,
And those aid stations at approximately 40 kilometres, there's water at least there?
Water, heaps of water, warm
Okay.
enough water all. We end up with about, I think, from memory, it's about 35,000 litres of water. We set out at various points around the course. Water at all of them. And there'll be a list in the rider guide exactly, but we normally start with more substantial snacks like bananas and maybe muesli bars at the first couple, while your heart rate's still low, while your stomach is still better at digesting things, and then it will move to gels, and then as a bit of a treat, normally at the last one, we'll have lollies and Coke, because really, if you're in that
Condensed
state,
sugar.
I assure you, Coke is the best thing. When it all turns bad, Coke's the go. The only problem with going to Coke, once you're on it, you've got to stay on. So just be mindful of that. So, but yeah, those things will be progressively based on advice from, like Dave Bryant. We go through that. One big thing with nutrition, guys, whatever you're going to have on the day, you need to be starting now.
Yeah.
Okay, I know it adds a bit of expense to what you do, but the gut tolerance is a bit of an issue for some people.
What's anticipated ride times?
That's a good question. Very good question, because people, expectations, capabilities get mixed up quite a lot with the dams, okay? And to put it in perspective, since we've run at Champion Lakes, we've only ever had 4 people crack 6 hours for the 5 dams, okay? Most people in the 5 dams are between 8 and 10 hours. Most of the ones we chat to all thought they would have gone an hour faster, okay? It's tough. It's called a challenge for that reason. And the 3 dams, you have to feel good at that 100k lunch stop, because the last 15k's are brutal, okay? Peak Road then becomes Urch Road, and there's spots of 19 to 20% on both. Okay, so gearing is a pretty important thing to be conscious of, but make sure you're stored up at that last lunch stop at the truck area there. So those of you who may ride up and down Bedvale Hill a bit, we use the big truck marshalling yard on, as you go up the hill on the right hand side, huge big area with all the trailers up. That's the lunch stop. We have permission from Main Roads, we take over half of that and we fence it all off 2 weeks out and all that sort of stuff. So that's where we set up. There's coffee there, there's your lunch if you've ordered it, there's more gels, and there's obviously your valet bag if you've gone with that thing.
How many hours for 3 dams?
3 dams, that's a good, I knew someone was going to ask. I looked it up while I was standing out there waiting for you, and I couldn't get the results up. I think the winner's about 35 to 36k an hour. Okay, the last couple of years we've had a few race guys. Matt Burton, the pro triathlete, went sub 6 hours on his own in 19. Brady Gilmore, who raced overseas, and a couple of the gun bike riders came in 21 and played around and got abused by me for ignoring a few road rules and stuff like that because they started racing each other. But yeah, it's around the 30k is where the most of the people come in the 3 dams. The 3 dams is the one we get the most complaints about how hard the course is. Okay, I think people who do the 5 are ready for it and have probably ridden it, whereas 3 dams get to that 100 and I think it's 119k on their Garmin and go, "Ooh, I'm going well here," and they cross Brookton Highway and go, "What is that?" You know, and to put that in perspective, we have 50 or 60 people at least will walk.